Nerdrotic.com.
Amazon's Jeff Bezos stated that he wanted his Game of Thrones, and in 2017 he got it when he secured the rights to The Lord of the Rings from the Tolkien estate for $250 million, and after unceremoniously getting rid of the two most important people who helped secure those rights, the former richest man in the world decided to bring in Jennifer Salke, who in turn hired 3 rejects from the destroyer of franchises, Jar Jar Abrams' bad reboot. At that point, the beacons were lit. The fandom was very concerned that our beloved Lord of the Rings would end up going down the same road as Star Wars, Star Trek, and Doctor Who, and followed by what can only be described as the worst PR campaign in Hollywood history, including but not limited to hiring influencers or superfans to do a video.
I can fix him.
Middle-earth had like a club.
Yo, this tune is banging!
It was like, I was trying, but every time I was like, okay, take a breath, something new would happen, then it was
One of them getting caught pissing in a corner at the trailer premiere event, finding out that the Amazon team ghosted Peter Jackson. In their first official article from Variety in February 2022, they took a shot at the fandom. Showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, whose only prior experience was one bad Star Trek script, were out there openly wondering if they could write the novel Tolkien never wrote. Producer Lindsay Weber was making statements like this: "It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like," confirming the fans' worst fears, and they voiced their opinion. Then Amazon decided to take another opportunity to attack the fandom and call them racist, and things were just getting started.
She is the first female dwarf that we will ever see on screen. Woo, woo, woo! I think it is time. I think with a franchise of this scale, it is so important that we make it as accessible as we possibly can for every single generation.
It's just gonna mean so much to like me personally, because it's getting that representation in Middle-earth.
It is so time for us to expand the accessibility and the opportunity for this world, Tolkien's world, to be seen in a way that it hasn't been seen before.
I also want to say representative, because we're getting like more diversity within this series. Like we're seeing our first black elf, we're seeing the first female dwarf, and I'm very looking forward to like looking at that.
It's so great to be able to have so many faces now to extend the accessibility for people like me to see themselves staring back at them in such a huge franchise.
This to me just feels like something that has just the furthest possible reach, and you know, we're choosing to tell it in these times, so we should represent it for these times.
It would be so cool to be able to see more female representation, to maybe see them actually interact with one another.
I play Princess Disa. She is a dwarf, the first female dwarf that we will see.
Sophia, I cannot tell you what a thrill it was to see you up on the screen as the first female dwarf depicted from this world. I mean,
first ever female dwarf to ever truly be seen. You know, she is the first female dwarf that we have ever seen on screen. First female dwarf. Female dwarf as a female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf.
Female dwarf.
Female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf. Female dwarf.
Unfortunately for Amazon, they found out pretty quickly that they messed with the wrong fandom, and the wrath of the Fellowship over the desecration of the professor's work was swift. Every clip and trailer ratioed, and the comment section is glorious reading to this day. Then Amazon made their biggest mistake: actually releasing the show. In the words of Gandalf, he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. Welcome to the Supercut review of the most subversive, amateurish, and worst adaptation ever made that just so happens to be the most expensive television show ever made, The Rings of Power Season 1.
But you have not seen what I've seen.
We start out with a prologue, once again voiced over by Galadriel, except this time it's Morfydd Clark using some reworked language from Elrond in Lord of the Rings, and something that sounds very familiar to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. And this giant cinematic prologue we were all promised ended up being a massive disappointment. Like the show, sure, we saw a few seconds of a dragon killing an eagle, a few seconds of battle, and the rest of it is Galadriel getting bullied and her talking to her brother Finrod. And yes, it is indeed Finrod who ends up dying by werewolf. And that's right, at the very beginning of this episode, Galadriel gets bullied. And after some pretty flat dialogue, which sounded a little bit like the Sphinx from Mystery Men.
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
What?
But the ship has a secret. For unlike the stone, her gaze is not downward but up, fixed upon the light that guides her.
Okay, am I the only one who finds these sayings just a little bit formulaic?
No mention of the Oath of Fëanor, the Kinslaying, the burning of the ships, the Noldor Rebellion, the exile of the Noldor, crossing the Ice Fangs, nothing. What we thought was the Helcarax ended up being something completely different because Galadriel is on a mission of vengeance. Stating the obvious, this was never in the lore, it was completely made up for this giant corporation, and it's nowhere near the spirit of Tolkien. High King Gil-galad has sent Galadriel the Girlbarian and her company on a mission to search out any remnants of the War of Wrath, any orcs, possibly Sauron, and they have been on this mission for centuries. Now, how much time has passed since the first age into the second age? No idea. Quick reminder, the second age of Middle-earth is over 3,500 years, and Amazon, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to condense all of the events in that time into a shorter time period. A couple of weeks, a month, 5 years, who knows? Girl boss Galadriel's male assistant Thorndeer is yet another made-up character who's always telling Galadriel they need to go home, but she's not going to stop until she has a mountain of orc heads. They established pretty early that Galadriel has a singular focus. She is a cold, calculating leader. She can punch through ice, decipher clues, slay cave trolls by herself.
That she is the worst casting choice of the show and drags the entire thing down. She makes Galadriel both an elven Mary Sue and an elven Karen who would like to speak to the manager. I can't believe it.
Why, Grace, I'm liking the cut of your jib.
However, interestingly, and tragically, there are no LGBT characters in all of the Lord of the Rings because J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic. And I think that, whether J.R.R. Tolkien likes it or not, I think that's become a clear element of the elves in particular in this world.
Never mind. Then there's the dialogue.
This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth. This way.
How can you be certain?
It's colder than the rest.
After Galadriel slays the cave troll all by herself because the men were fighting like morons, she wants to go further north and they all quit on her. Because that's what men do, so they laid down their swords, no symbolism there, and Galadriel don't need no man, she goes on without him. Oh look, it's more original characters. Harfoots, which are actually hobbits, but Amazon can't use that term, so we're just going to call them Harfoots. And we have a couple of repurposed characters, female Frodo, female Sam, and Hobo Baggins. Now, one of the signs that we're going to be in for some pretty god-awful writing in the next 5 seasons is characters constantly describing what we can clearly see on screen, constantly describing exactly how they feel, and a lot of very convenient things happening, which happens a lot in this show. Not much to talk about with these Harfoot scenes in the entire first or second episode. They're filled with exposition, with the occasional cringe dialogue, stage Irish.
If we didn't do everything we weren't supposed to do, we'd hardly do anything at all.
And look at her. You find all that down by the riverbank, did you?
I wonder if there's trouble down south.
And what concern is that of yours, Eleanor Brandyfoot?
They're always after me, Lucky Charms.
There was a wolf that had the Harfoots dead to rights, but I guess he already had 11sies, and we're definitely dealing with female Frodo and female Sam.
They come across, though, as a female version of Sam and Frodo, and I think that's fantastic.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
And the show finally gets around to introducing us to Doogie Elrond, and hey, maybe we'll learn something about his character. Oh, never mind, this scene's about Galadriel. First, Elrond is told he can't go to an Elf Lord's meeting because Elf Lords only, and it's probably because he's half-elven.
Your friend has arrived.
She is here. Why didn't you say so?
She just did. So what does Doogie Elrond tell us about Our Lady of Light, Our Lady of the Woods of Lothlorien?
And look at you now. Commander of the Northern Armies, warrior of the Wastelands.
What? What the fuck?
Oh, but it doesn't end there.
I half expected you to arrive caked in grime and mud.
This time frostbite and troll blood.
You've got to be fucking kidding me. This is a character vandalization on the level of Luke Skywalker and the Doctor from Doctor Who. It is everything we thought she would be, except worse. Galadriel the Girlbarian, who's on a hunt for vengeance, searching for Sauron, and she immediately wants to see the manager.
I want to hear about you. Your harrowing journey.
Why, Elrond? You really have become a politician.
You make it sound so grim.
I am not some courtier to be placated by idle flattery. I demand to speak with the king directly.
Now, Doogie Elrond tells her that her men quit on her because she exceeded Manager Gil-galad's orders, and she demands to see the manager again. She even gets in his face. And because every guy that interacts with Galadriel is reduced to a duplicitous boyfriend, a duplicitous manager, or a duplicitous personal assistant, Doogie Elrond grants her request. Manager Gil-galad declares the days of war over, and we are now in the days of peace, and he grants a gift to Galadriel and all the men who quit on her, the elven equivalent of an Amazon Unlimited gift card, a trip to Valinor. And like a true Karen, she refuses the gift card. This is followed by modern Hollywood's attempt to be Tolkienian. Galadriel describes what we can clearly see on screen.
The likeness of one fallen preserved upon a living thing.
Then there's this interaction.
It is over. The evil is gone.
Then why is it not gone from in here?
After all you have endured, it is only natural to feel conflicted.
Conflicted?
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe Brie Larson has been dethroned.
Let us say that all is as you fear, and this enemy is out there somewhere, lying in wait. Do you truly believe seeking him out will satisfy you? That one more orc upon the point of your blade will bring you peace?
Apparently over at Amazon, $60 million an episode only gets you horrific writing, overacting, pedestrian, amateur CW. Galadriel is not a commander of the Northern Armies, she's not a warrior of the Wasteland, and she doesn't want to have orc heads on the point of her blade. She's a tortured, battle-hardened warrior with PTSD that we're supposed to feel sorry for. Now, they haven't shown us any of this, but they've certainly spent the entire episode telling us there's no mystery here. We know Sauron is out there, and apparently so do a couple of other characters, and we'll get to that because it doesn't make things better, it makes things worse. So we're just sitting around waiting for Galadriel to be right. Meanwhile, in the Southlands, it's Guess Who's Coming to Second Breakfast. And if those scenes in the trailer with Don Lemonless chained by the ankles weren't on the nose enough for you, we've got some more.
Where was he from?
Didn't say east, I think.
And what day was he here?
Oh, let it go, knife is. It's a bloody patch of grass. The lot you lump us in with died off 1,000 years ago. When are you people gonna let the past go?
What do you mean, you people?
And after what I am sure was some very necessary exposition mixed in with a message as subtle as a Joe Biden speech, we learn that this is a forbidden love story. You know how I know? I mean, aside from the Access Media telling us for the last 6 months and the longing looks between Bronwyn and Arondir in the scene prior, no, they actually tell us.
Only twice in known history has a pairing between elves and humans even been attempted, and on each occasion, it ended in tragedy. It ended in death.
You need not remind me.
Don Lemonless is part of an elven outpost of colonist oppressors, keeping an eye on the southern men who were sympathetic or allies to Morgoth centuries before. Bronwyn is a single mother because Hollywood doesn't have fathers anymore to a son named Theo who has a little treasure, a broken sword with the Mark of Sauron on it. And let's get to that Mark of Sauron. Yes, the Mark of Sauron, not to be confused with the Eye of Sauron. The one we saw on Finrod in the fortress and now on this broken sword. It wouldn't be right here on this map, would it? Arondir hears about some poison grass, sees some gook come out of an udder of a cow and decides to investigate the next town, and Bronwyn's gonna go with them and just leave her kid behind. It's only a day's journey. After what I'm guessing is a day's journey, we get some more soap opera acting between our southern activist and Don Lemonless, definitely telling us they're in a forbidden romance just in case you didn't catch it the 3 times before. They arrive at the town and it's on fire. Meanwhile, back in Linden, we have a little conversation between regional manager Gil-galad and Doogie Elrond. Turns out High King Gil-galad, well known for his duplicity, sent Galadriel away for her own good, and he is well aware of the darkness, and this is his justification.
She might have inadvertently kept alive the very evil she sought to defeat. For the same wind that seeks to blow out a fire may also cause its spread.
Your temper is very quick, my friend. But until you learn to master your rage...
Your rage will become your master? That's what you were gonna say, right? Right?
Not necessarily.
Then we meet Grandma Brimbor. Then a comet flies over all of our characters, showing us that they're all in the same timeline. It also doesn't make us think at all of Game of Thrones Season 2. Female Frodo finds Gandalf not Gandalf. Now these scenes are intercut with Galadriel sailing to Valinor with all the men who quit on her. And the writers were so proud of this piece of dialogue from the beginning of the episode, they decided to recall it here.
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot? Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
I don't know, Amazon. Why does a dumpster fire burn and a toilet flush? High Regional Manager Gilgalad picks up a leaf with cancer, and oh, he should have listened to Galadriel. Speaking of Galadriel, she and all the men who quit on her were armored up on a boat sailing to Valinor, and then they take off the armor. Then she jumps out of that boat because she can't give up her mission of vengeance to have a nice leisurely swim in the Sundering Seas a good 100, 200, 300 miles away from Middle-earth. Here on this map is roughly where Galadriel decided to take a nice leisurely swim, and keep in mind, Arda is supposed to be flat right now.
Salted pork.
The second chapter of the Fellowship of the Rings, and quite frankly, the most important, according to not only yours truly and probably every Tolkien fan, along with real Tolkien scholar, you know, the one that Amazon fired, and Tolkien himself, because this is mystery box bullshit storytelling, we have a mystery, and we're meant to believe that either Gandalf, not Gandalf, is Sauron, or Theo, Bronwyn's son. After unfortunately watching each show a couple of times, I have to say they managed to make the second one slower. It's a competition between the Harfoot scenes or the Guess Who's Coming to 11Z scenes that will put you to sleep faster. Female Frodo and female Sam find Gandalf, not Gandalf, and manage to make him look more homeless. Oh, and how do I know he's Gandalf?
You want it for yourself!
Bilbo Baggins! Do not take me for some conjurer of cheap tricks.
Female Frodo and female Sam make him a little homeless hut, and then later on in the episode, he takes the fireflies out of their firefly lamp and shows them a constellation. That's it. Our star-crossed forbidden lovers Don Lemonless and the Harad activist arrive at the village that's clearly been torched to investigate, and then we get riveting dialogue like this.
This was no ground shake. Someone dug this passage.
Something.
Don Lemonless tells Bronwyn to go back and warn her village, and then he jumps down in the hole and promptly gets caught by orcs. Of course, the villagers don't believe her because she's a woman. She goes back to her house where she abandoned her kid and gets attacked by an orc, and of course she slays it with the help of her son, and it was impossible to see much of anything because the camera was shaking so much. Now they'll have to believe the mighty Bronwyn when she plops down the severed head of an orc. Well, here's another Tolkien Easter egg, Eregion, or as they would say in this show, Eregion. Second Age realm of the Noldor and home of the Elven Smiths. High Regional Manager Gilgalad tasked Doogie Elrond to work with Celebrimbor on a very special project, and that project is a giant
dick.
Yeah.
Take a look out of starboard.
Oh my God, it looks like a huge...
Johnson. Yes, sir. Get on the horn to British intelligence and let them know about this.
And that project is a giant tower that will have the most powerful elven forge in Middle-earth. Now, I know what you're thinking, the Rings of Power, because this show's called The Rings of Power. Sorry to spoil it for you, there are no Rings of Power in the first season of The Rings of Power. How do I know that?
You have not seen what I have seen.
Grandma Brimbor tells Doogie Elrond that he needs this done by spring, so they decide to get some help. Elrond suggests going to the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, which is very strange because it's Celebrimbor who's more known in the lore to be the friends of dwarves. Not even sure why I bother at this point. They clearly didn't. So they show on a map how far away Eregion is from Khazad-dûm, and it looks like they just walk next door. They won't let Grandma Brimbor and Elrond in Khazad-dûm, so Elrond has to invoke the right of Sagin Tarag, which is an endurance test of breaking rocks with hammers. Now, I'm guessing the average audience member could have figured that out once they saw the rocks axe and the hammers, but they decided to tell us all anyway. Incidentally, Doogie Elrond left Grandma Brimbor at the door of Khazad-dûm and said he would be back in a few days. That's a long walk back to Region in a gown. This is another huge chunk of the episode where next to nothing happens. Remember, young Doogie Elrond went to Khazad-dûm with a proposal. I want you to keep that in mind. If Doogie Elrond wins the Sigyn Tarag, he will be granted a boon by his friend, Prince Durin IV. If he loses, he's banished from dwarf lands forever. So, of course, he loses on purpose, and then Doogie and Prince Durin Rakeda commence to have what I could only interpret as a lover's quarrel on an elevator. Durin Rakeda is clearly mad because Doogie hasn't been around for 20 years, and then he has him apologize to his wife, Disa, who, quite frankly, isn't the worst thing in this. And the Khazad-dûm scenes look pretty good, but nothing happens in that proposal I mentioned. Doesn't happen in this episode. The one character that looked completely legit, King Durin III, who had one line. But there is a mystery box in a mystery box show. You can't make this shit up. And no, that's not the Arkenstone in that box, it's Mithril. So let's get back to Galadriel's leisurely little swim hundreds of miles away from Middle-earth. I know you won't believe this if you didn't see it, but she randomly comes across a raft in the middle of the ocean, and no, I'm not making this up, with another new made-up character, Halbrand and the Disposables. They are the survivors of a ship that was attacked by the Worm. When questioning Galadriel, Halbrand, who can possibly be Sauron, says this.
Does she look dangerous to you?
Looks can be deceiving.
The Worm attacks again, and Halbrand, because he's Sauron, bails on the Disposables, and after Galadriel gets pushed into the water, she bails on him too, and then Galadriel has the nerve to chew out Halbrand for abandoning his friends. During some getting to know you, because they have a lot of time, because they are adrift on a raft, and that's the name of this episode, and quite frankly, I think they're taking the shipping a little bit too literally. Hashtag Sarandriel. Galadriel says she chose not to go to Valinor and take a leisurely swim for duty's sake, when in the lore, she actually was fine with her exile because she wanted to rule her own realm in Middle-earth. Halbrand, said he was on the run because his village was destroyed by orcs. Then a storm comes, Galadriel gets knocked off the raft, Halbrand saves her. Then they wake up, and lucky for them, wouldn't you know it, they randomly run across a Númenórean ship. Speaking of Númenóreans, no Isildur or Elendil in the first two episodes, two major players in the Second Age and this show.
Salted pork.
We start with Don Lemonlass getting caught by the very white orcs and getting immediately chained by the ankle. Nothing says Tolkien like allegorical symbolism. The very white orc mentions Adar, which also happens to be the name of this episode. I wonder if we're going to meet him later. Meanwhile, on the second boat Galadriel and Halbrand just randomly came across on the ocean, our insufferable main character wakes up clothed and fed and continues to act insufferable. Then we are finally introduced to Elendil, and what the hell is that on his chest? Ladies and gentlemen, we have moob armor. Totally Not Sauron asks where they're going, and Elendil waits to answer for dramatic effect. We are indeed at the doomed island kingdom of Númenor, and sure, this show has had some nice establishing shots, some broad sweeping landscapes that lead directly into boring exposition and contrived events. Galadriel insinuates that they might find out why things are strange between the Númenóreans and the elves. We don't. I guess this is a good time to point out that Galadriel is short. Totally Not Sauron stops to look at a forge. Subtle. Just in case you weren't sure we were in Númenor, we're told one more time.
Patience! We are men and women of Númenor.
Once again, Galadriel is taken to the manager, and this time it's Queen Regent Miriel, and then we get dueling female empowerment. Queen Regent Miriel, who we'll get to in just a moment, asks Galadriel her name, and she gets her Khaleesi moment. After some more forced dialogue to show that we're dealing with two very powerful women here that just end up sounding annoying, so annoying it takes Halbrand, to calm things down. During the ladies' pissing match, Karl Marx Pharazôn mentions that elves have not been allowed on the shores of Numenor for generations. Now let's take a brief moment to talk about Numenor, Queen Regent Muriel, Pharazôn, and potential spoilers from the books, which might not be spoilers at all, considering once again that this show has taken Tolkien's lore and reduced it to Easter eggs. Numenor is Tolkien's Atlantis, mixed in with some Sodom and Gomorrah and possibly Noah's flood. Numenorians were very tall, they lived hundreds of years, that's who Aragorn was descended from. In the beginning, their island was prosperous, but then there was a split between the Kingsmen and the Faithful. The Faithful remained faithful to the Valar. The Kingsmen were jealous of the elves' immortality. Now, in the context of the show, they give us a couple of little hints. Things start really going bad towards the end during the time of Pharazôn and Muriel. I'm not even finished with this episode, and at this point, I have to ask who in the hell this show is for. Normies aren't going to know what's going on because everything is moving at a snail's pace with very little information, and book fans are going to be pissed because all the actual lore that exists in the books that's been put in this show would fit into your average TikTok video. And let's talk about Queen Regent Muriel, who never was a Queen Regent and never met Galadriel. Sure, she was around during the fall of Numenor, but there's the little problem of her being born 1,617 years after the forging of the Rings of Power. Out of the 25 rulers of Numenor, 3 being women, they decided to choose Muriel. Why? The reason? Ideology. It really reflects what a Kingsman would do. Turn their back on the source, Tolkien, and pray at the altar of agenda. I guess it's also so it could pass the Bechdel test. Later on in the series, Galadriel and Muriel go into battle together and get their Thelma and Louise moment. Then we finally get a chance to meet Isildur, the man who cut the ring from Sauron's hand. This is a younger version who has his head in the clouds. How do I know? Well, there's a scene where they show him not paying attention, and then someone says he always has his head in the clouds.
Your mind was in the bleeding clouds again all day. What is it?
Just eager to get out there.
We also meet his completely invented sister, but the most important thing we learn from this scene is the sea is always right. We're supposed to believe that Queen Regent Muriel here is trying to accuse Isildur's father, Elendil, of treason.
And are you an elf friend?
Motherfucker, what makes you think I care?
Remember that great line of dialogue, why do ships float when a stone cannot? They loved it so much they called back on it. Well, they did it again.
It was the sea that put her in my path. The sea is always right!
The sea is always right!
And the sea is always right.
The sea cannot commit treason.
You gotta be f***ing kidding.
Obviously, Muriel has an ulterior motive, and she tasks Elendil to watch over Galadriel, and then she hands him a sword, and that better not be Narsil. We're back to Don Lemonless, and thank God he tells us that the orcs are digging the tunnels to avoid detection and avoid sunlight, because I wouldn't have figured that out.
This must be how they escaped our detection, and how they shield themselves from sunlight.
Guess who's coming to second breakfast is imprisoned with his regiment of elves, and let's talk about them for just a moment. They don't look like elves. They just look like dudes. There's nothing ethereal or special about them at all. They look like Witcher elves. The very bland elves refuse to cut down a tree that's in the way of a giant trench that they're supposed to dig. The very white orcs get angry and then offer them some water. Is this a trap? Of course it's a trap. And then Arendir's friend, you know, the one we all figured was dead meat, dies.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
While the bland elf and the very white orcs are arguing, Don Lemonless offers to cut down the tree, and this scene reminds me of something.
I will take it. I will take it.
I will take the ring to Mordor.
I will cut it down!
As Guess Who's Coming to 11's is cutting down the tree, we get a good look at the landscape and the size of the trench and what's covering it. Where in the hell did the very white orcs get all that fabric? And how in the hell did the elves miss this?
Legolas, what do your elf eyes see?
A big-ass trench!
We can't go very long without the insufferable Galadriel, who dials it up a little bit in this scene. She escapes her confinement and then very kindly gets confronted by Elendil, and she threatens to murder him.
I will take my chances on the skiff.
That would leave me little choice but to shout for your minders.
Suppose the words never manage to escape your throat.
After more insufferable dialogue from an intolerable character...
Anywhere is better than here, where I am hated by all who see me.
Yup!
we find out that Elendil is a friend of elves, and they talk about a Hall of Lore. That's convenient, but before we get to that, we need to talk about Galadriel. Almost 3 episodes in, and aside from all the other problems, I would say the biggest one is the main character, the one they centered this entire show around, one of the most popular characters from the secondary world. If you haven't watched the show, we're not underselling this. She is completely unlikable. If you have watched the show, she's probably the reason you stopped watching. And it looks like Amazon might be aware of this. Oh look, a well-timed Hollywood Reporter article from September 9th. Rings of Power star Morfydd Clark on how humility will play a big part in Galadriel's evolution. In other words, please stay with us, she's on a character arc. It's never a good sign when you have to justify creatively bankrupt decisions in the access media. Spoilers, there is no character arc, not this season anyway. Galadriel and Elendil go on a horsey ride to the Hall of Lore, and what the hell? She really likes that horse.
What the hell is even that?
They finally make it to the Hall of Lore, and Galadriel, the warrior of the wastelands, the commander of Gil-galad's northern armies, finally looks at a map and figures out that the mark of Sauron is Mordor. But that's not all. Here in the Hall of Lore, the lore masters seem to miss something kind of important.
What is this?
The account of a human spy retrieved from an enemy dungeon. He drew this to recall the tower's location.
It speaks not only of a place, but a plan. A plan by which to create a realm of their own, where evil would not only endure, but thrive.
You mean to tell me that the lore masters of the Hall of Lore just so happen to have a piece of parchment that has Sauron's plan B? That's been there for what, decades? Centuries? And they missed it? As much as this episode drags, the last half is excruciating. The good news is not much happens. Now, Halbrand wants to forge steel. I wonder why. But you're not allowed to forge steel in Numenor unless you have a guild badge. But as Shad Brooks pointed out, how in the hell can you learn to forge steel if you're not allowed to until you get a guild badge? Well, Totally Not Sauron fails at stealing a guild badge from some guys that he avoided a fight with and made friends with and then got into a fight with and almost killed a couple of them. He goes to Numenorian jail, and this part was just unavoidable. On to the Harfoots. No, we don't learn very much. The Harfoots that we can't call hobbits are about to go on their migration. Obo Baggins talks about female Frodo again.
And we got Nori. No. Look, once that girl puts her head to something, nothing can stop her.
Just in case you didn't catch how free-spirited she was the first 7 or 8 times. I guess you're not supposed to go off trail or walk alone. I know this because it's in a chant they repeat multiple times. Nothing happens. The constellation not Gandalf showed female Frodo and female Sam comes up again, but we're no closer to figuring out where it takes us. The Harfoots finally figure out that female Frodo is hiding, not Gandalf. Female Frodo almost gets decaravan, and they all get in trouble when the whole family gets put to the back of the line. But not to worry, not Gandalf helps them so they don't fall behind. But why were they worried so much? Well, this is where we find out the most pertinent information about the Harfoots. They're assholes, because if you fall behind, they're just gonna leave you. Sure, they'll have a ceremony later and feel real bad about it, but they'll still leave you to die. This is followed by a useless scene to show that there is some forced drama in Elendil's family. But we do get the single most cringe line of dialogue in this episode. Turns out Isildur is a fanboy of Galadriel.
The Galadriel. Scourge of the Orcs.
Never mind what she's the scourge of.
Not just the warrior of the northern wastelands, not just the commander of the northern armies. Now Galadriel is the scourge of the orcs. Oh, and Isildur's completely made-up sister, whose name I won't even bother to remember, got accepted into the University of Numenor. And remember, Amazon created Isildur's sister to bring a female energy to the family. Galadriel goes to visit Totally Not Sauron in Numenorian jail, and she figured out that he's actually the king of the southern people based on the pendant he's wearing. He's the anti-Aragorn, totally subverting our expectations. That's right, the Amazon created Halbrand, who was basically Aragorn, is going to end up being Sauron. Fuck this show. And because Galadriel's been reduced to the girl who's the key to everything, we have one more scene with Queen Regent Muriel, and who I assume is Tar Plantir, her dad, saying that the elf has arrived the moment we feared. That's what we were all thinking around the beginning of the first episode of this series. The end of Arda shows Amazon doing their best Zack Snyder impression with the failed escape of Don Lemonless, where all that ended up happening was all the white elves were killed by a warg. The very white orcs take Guess Who's Coming to Second Breakfast to their leader, the namesake of this episode, Arda, and we don't get to see him.
All right, folks, my name is Daryl Weathers, and I'm with the Construction Workers Union. I work with a lot of fine men who have families to feed. I don't know about y'all, but we worked long and hard to get our pay up to a level where we can make a decent living. And these knife-ears took our jobs. Yeah, they're down. Well, they took our jobs. Knife-ears took our jobs. These damn knife-ears took our jobs. Kick them out. Make Numenor great
again. There's a tempest in me.
Remember last week when we got one of the professor's favorite things, allegorical symbolism? Well, this week they decided to drop the symbolism and go full allegory. And it happens in the first 3 minutes. Girl Isildur, the made-up sister of Isildur, witnesses populism, nationalism, and an immigration allegory, all from the perspective of the modern Hollywood writer. And yes, they went full, they took our gerbs.
They took our jobs. Yeah, they're down. Took our jobs. They did.
And going as far as to call the Queen Regent Muriel an elf lover. Subtle. Strangely enough, the guy who looks like Karl Marx Farazan ends up giving what Hollywood perceives as a MAGA nationalist speech. Now you might think I'm being a little hyperbolic with this. Nope.
But exactly where we find them is the beginning of potential polarization between a sort of a nationalistic view and a much more loyalty to the elven side of their nature.
And for good measure, if you didn't pick up that Karl Marx Farazan was a popular guy, they have his son telling Girl Isildur that he's a popular guy.
Isn't a name in the city he doesn't know. Crowd he can't turn, a Faber he isn't owed.
It's impressive.
I was going to say infuriating.
Now, this particular episode is truly the Rings of Girl Power, featuring not one, not two, but 3 incompetent girl bosses. Galadriel acts insufferable, Queen Regent Muriel flares her nostrils as they argue about Sauron, Halbrand, who's totally not like Aragorn.
I believe the man you hold in your dungeons is no common brawler, but the lost heir in exile to the throne of the Southlands.
Then there's some repurposed Lord of the Rings dialogue.
There's no strength left in the world of men. They're scattered, divided, leaderless.
His people are scattered, leaderless.
Is there a f***ing echo in here?
Muriel flares her nostrils again and says she doesn't believe Galadriel and then takes a shot at Elendil.
And I suppose Elendil here is a runic emperor.
It's a petty lord, actually.
You'd think a Queen Regent of Numenor would know her histories and know that Elendil is descended from a Numenorean king and a descendant of Elros, brother of Elrond. Queen Regent Muriel denies warrior Galadriel's request to give her some ships, some men, and women, Halbrand, so she can go to war in the Southlands. That's when Galadriel once again demands to see the manager, followed by that signature cringe Rings of Power dialogue.
There's a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason, and it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
Try me, bitch.
Then Galadriel gets locked up, and I can hear the Galadriel stan saying right now, see, she's not a Mary Sue, she was humbled. Not exactly. One of the traits of a Mary Sue is their flaws are endearing and they end up getting what they want anyway and being right all along. And sorry, spoilers, that's what happens. Halbrand, mocks her a little bit for getting locked up and then says this.
Has it ever occurred to you that you're not battling trolls or orcs, but men?
Are you really about to advise me in the art of war?
No. I wouldn't dare. But then, the Queen's Court isn't exactly your usual battlefield, is it?
No, in the lore with the real Galadriel, the royal court is precisely where her battlefield is, seeing that she's royalty, not a battle commander. We saw this with General Leia. We saw it with King Valkyrie, and now we're seeing it with Warrior Galadriel, the subversion of gender norms in Tolkien. Sauron, sorry Halbrand, then recaps the previous scene so we can see what really pissed off Queen Regent Muriel just in case we missed it the first time. Once again asking to go see the manager, the king, which is strange because totally not Sauron wasn't in that scene. Thank God for small favors, no Harfoots in this one, but we did get Don Lemonless and Bronwyn, and even though it did take about a half an hour of the episode, there's not much to go over here. I mean, aside from orcs treating their dead better than Harfoots. After the tease of last week, we finally get a good look at Adar, who is just an evil elf who really likes his orcs for some reason. He mercy kills one, he looks really sad about it, and then things get dumb. Adar tells Don Lemonless he's been told many lies and that he might want to be a god. After some small talk, Adar tells Don Lemonless he's gonna let him go, but he has to deliver a very important message. So important that he's gonna let him have his weapons back, and I'm sure he's gonna tell the other orcs not to mess with them or kill him. And this message must be one hell of a revelation, right? Nope. So girl boss Bronwyn, who by the way is just clean as can be, nice makeup, her hair looks good, and everybody else looks like they've been rolling around in poop, has led everyone to the watchtower like the good girl boss she is, except they completely forgot to bring food, yet they had plenty of time.
If there are any of you here who want to live, we make for the Elven Tower at first light.
Where's the rest?
That is the rest.
This is just a lame contrivance to get Theo to go back to the town to get some food with his friend Insilnor so Theo can run into an orc, and by the way, they left all their livestock too. Why didn't he just leave the sword hilt there? That's what this entire contrived, long, boring scene ended up being about. Insilnor abandons Theo, and Theo fights off the orcs again in a very contrived manner, only to be saved by Deus Ex Don Lemonless, who was indeed given back his weapons, and the orcs try to kill both of them immediately. Get a slow motion scene of orcs attacking them in the forest, Don Lemonless catching arrows and shooting them back. Remember arrows. And in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night, Bronwyn somehow finds them, but it's okay. They escape the forest into a field. The sun rises, and the orcs thankfully decide not to loose their arrows until the worst possible moment. So what did we learn from these scenes? Other than they were long and boring? Not much. Adar is looking for the sword hilt. That's why he dug that big-ass trench that no one noticed from the watchtower. And that big, important message from Adar couldn't have been more cliche. It was just surrender or die. That's it. And the southern barkeep, well, he's totally down with Sauron. Couldn't have figured that one out.
Have you heard of him, lad? Have you heard of Sauron?
Meanwhile, Elendil, future High King of Arnor and Gondor, and his son Isildur, major players in the Second Age, are reduced to C-list characters whose actions aren't even worth mentioning. Isildur and his friends got fired from the Númenórean Navy because Isildur was distracted by some mysterious voice calling him to the west. In the books, there is a ban on sailing to the west, but in the context of this show, they have said nothing about it. And Girl Isildur just exists to witness things. Back to Galadriel, who's set to be released and escorted back to the elves, but we know our great warrior of the wastelands, the commander of the northern armies and scourge of the orcs ain't having any of that. In what might be, so far, the most cringe scene in all of this series, she defeats not one, not two, not three, not four, 5 Númenórean guards with ease, doesn't even break a sweat, and smirks. This abysmal choreography reminds me of something. Of course, they had to quickly cut away from this fight because the very short Morfydd Clark looks ridiculous fighting men who are a foot and a half taller.
Down with the patriarchy. That's the message.
Our insufferable Mary Sue escapes, climbs a tower, breaks into the Queen's chamber, and confronts Muriel with absolute ease. Galadriel finally gets her meeting with the manager, and she finds out that the king is indeed sick. Then we get some actual lore from the books that's just talked about.
My father was always restrained in his beliefs. But after his coronation, something changed. He became strident, claiming that we'd provoked the anger of the Valar and must repent and return to the old ways.
More tell, not show. If you haven't figured out by now, Númenor is doomed. They showed us Muriel's premonition at the beginning of the episode, and then they show essentially the same scene, except with Galadriel, which ended up being one of my favorites.
The sea is always right!
Once again, we get a repurposed line from Lord of the Rings.
Palantiri show many visions, some that will never come to pass.
For the mirror shows many things, and some things that have not yet come to pass.
Then we get a little moment between the girl bosses where Galadriel discovers that she's not the only one who's always right. Muriel's always right too.
I know what it is to be the only one. The only one who sees. The only one who knows.
Queen Regent Muriel once again denies Galadriel's request to go to war. Like all the time spent on the Harfoot's last episode that really led to next to nothing, the same thing is going on with the dwarves. It just looks a little better. We transition to Eregion with Elrond and Celebrimbor, who's sizing him up like a piece of meat.
It is everything you said it would be. What?
Remember that proposal that Elrond had for the dwarves in episode 2 that we really never saw accepted? Well, that happened off screen. Will they show us something rather than tell us? Sure, and then they'll tell us about it.
Elves and dwarves working together.
Guess we'll just have to take their word for it, because I don't see any dwarves and elves here. But this presents a bit of a problem. How much time has passed? It seems like it's only been a couple of days with Don Lemonless. Same with our Hadad activist. Same with Galadriel. Now, I know elves and dwarves work fast, but that is a minimum of months. Don't forget, everyone was connected in the same timeline with the comet. They also did away with the map this episode, so the insecure and weak Grandma Brimbor sends Elrond next door to Khazad-dûm. This is applicable for this entire series, but a lot of time and money was spent on these Elrond and Durin scenes where next to nothing happens, the story barely moves forward. Essentially, we find out what was in the mystery box in episode 2 if you were awake enough to remember. Mithril. Remember Mithril from Lord of the Rings? And it's supposed to be incredibly dangerous and difficult to mine, which is supposed to foreshadow what we saw in the trailer, the Balrog. Remember the Balrog from Lord of the Rings? Otherwise, it's a bunch of forced, pointless, soulless drama with no setup and only a very superficial payoff. Apparently, Durin III is mad at Durin IV. Why? Well, we're told this, but we only see the apology. But what we do get to see is Disa Singh and Disa Thai. After Elrond discovered what the dwarves were hiding, now it's time for a new mystery for our mystery box. What are the elves hiding? I suppose we'll find out in 2 or 3 episodes. It's a big problem though. I don't care. In our final scene, Galadriel is being sent back to the elves by Queen Regent Muriel. She's told very kindly to go in peace by Elendil, and she responds with resting bitch face. The scene is comprised of a lot of looking and looking and looking, and then finally looking at some leaves falling. As the leaves of Nimloth fall, we get repeated dialogue from early in the episode, and I'm starting to think this might be a courtesy considering most of us are falling asleep watching this. Could it be a portent or just a strong breeze? I don't really care. And what we all knew what was going to happen throughout the entire episode finally happens at the very end. Galadriel gets exactly what she wants. With Galadriel, the girl Barian warrior, the wasteland scourge of the orcs and commander of the northern armies, and some of the brave sons and daughters of Numenor. Never mind the fact in future episodes those daughters seem to disappear. Kind of like the elves, Harfoots, and dwarves of Kalur in the Third Age. And yes, this is the battle later on in the season where we get Cheeto Galadriel. And that wraps it up. Intersectional repurposed mystery box with a Tolkien skin. Who's Adar?
Mystery box.
What are Gil-galad and Grandma Brimbor up to?
Mystery box.
Who's the stranger?
Mystery box.
Theo's sword.
Mystery box.
Who's Sauron? Well, it's Halbrand, but
mystery box.
What's a mystery box? Briefly, it's a Jar Jar Abrams and bad reboot creation. It's a box with nothing in it because it's just about the mystery, and it's also a cheap and easy way to avoid difficult things like plot and characterization.
Hi, John. Is this show divisive?
I don't know. There are far more, there's a lot of vocal people about it, but nowhere near as divisive as, say, Star Wars had been or anything like that. I think generally speaking, the general audience has been quite enjoying it.
Wrong!
For you, I will keep it strong and simple. Come at me.
So So where did we leave off last time? The Harfoots were migrating, Galadriel was being insufferable, Halbrand was being Sauron, the Stranger is a mystery, Adar is a mystery, the Hadad activists and Don Lemonless, guess who's coming to second breakfast, are trapped at the Watchtower, and the Númenóreans are going to sail to Middle-earth. Sorry, spoilers. By the end of this episode, the Harfoots are still migrating, Galadriel's still being insufferable, Halbrand is still Sauron, the Stranger's still a mystery, Adar is still a mystery, guess who's coming to second breakfast is still trapped at the Watchtower, and the Númenóreans have decided again to sail to Middle-earth. Okay, we might have learned a few minor details that progressed this show that's going at a snail's pace, inches forward, but that was far outweighed by the total destruction of Tolkien's lore. My one big takeaway from this episode is the elves are as big an assholes as the Harfoots, but not as much as the people who run this show and put it out. We did get a break from the Harfoots last episode, thank God for small favors, but unfortunately they're back with female Frodo and totally not Gandalf. And like the true bad reboot disciples these hack writers are, or graduates of repurposing school, we get a repurposed Strider's riddle set to a horrible song.
Through cold and through frost, that not all who wander or wander are lost.
In the following scene with Adar, or Adar, I don't really care what he's called, we get some more of that trademark Rings of Power repeating things we already know. We're shown once again that the orcs don't like the sun and their skin burns it, except for the times it doesn't. We did get a crumb of new information in this scene. Adar, or Adar, wants to do something with the sun. It probably has something to do with bringing in a new age of orcs because these hack writers can't come up with anything original and they can only repurpose. By the way, Adar or Adar or whatever the hell he's called is just an elf, but he created the orcs. Now, how can just an elf create the orcs? The orcs that were originally created by Morgoth? I don't even know why I bother at this point. It's not like J.D. Payne or Patrick McKay give a crap. 5 episodes in, it's pretty damn clear that the showrunner's mantra of going back to the book was just to get names and places for Easter eggs. Oh, did we say adapt the lore? We meant assault it. Meanwhile, back in Hadadville, remember we had to wait an entire episode to hear that the message from Adar or Adar was surrender or die. Well, they're gonna finally deliver that message to the people, and Girl Boss Bronwyn is gonna get her big girl boss moment with a big girl boss speech.
I know I'm not the king you have awaited, but if you choose to stand with me and fight, this tower will no longer be a reminder of our frailty, but a symbol of our strength. Who will stand with me? Who among you will stand and fight?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Well, that was inspiring. Not surprised half the people left when the tweaker gave an equally inspiring speech.
I'll say this for our ancestors. They lived!
Man, that Bronwyn girl boss speech was so different from Muriel's girl boss speech from last week. I understand Amazon had some limitations. I mean, they only had $1 billion to spend, but maybe you should have spent a little more on the writers. Head of the Tolkien Society, Sean Gunnar, wasn't kidding when he unironically tweeted that the Rings of Power will pass the Bechdel test. Unfortunately, it's not passing the Tolkien test. Oh, and I have a question when it comes to Hadadville. Can't they just leave? I mean, since we're completely screwing with the lore at this point, why not send everyone from Hadadville up north or to the west to Númenor? You're missing a great opportunity here, Amazon, for an immigration allegory. I'm just kidding. I gotta stop giving him ideas. There's a boring scene with Elendil and Isildur. Apparently he doesn't know what he's looking for, and apparently the showrunners can't explain what he's looking for either, because I have no idea and I don't care. Alls I know is this show should be focused on characters like Gil-galad, Elendil, and Isildur, and they are just C-list characters, maybe B-minus list characters, and they're all idiots. And no, I have no idea where Celeborn is, but more on that later. Then we get some Halbrand forging, because he's totally not Sauron. Then a Númenórean moron guard informs him he has visitors, and then Halbrand goes and visits somebody.
What? Southlander? Your visitors.
Halbrand, who had visitors, goes to visit Galadriel and Queen Regent Muriel. Remember Queen Regent Muriel? She gave such a powerful speech last episode that I completely forgot it. You know, the one that was picked by her people to be Queen Regent. Well, apparently, she's a battle commander too. I think the character of Muriel beautifully encapsulates everything wrong with this show. Yes, she was from the lore. Yes, she was destined for the throne of Numenor, but it was taken when Ar-Pharazôn forced her into marriage. She never was a Queen Regent. She never was a battle commander who went into battle. She never met Galadriel. But what they needed was another girl boss, because this show is short on them. That reminds me, I forgot to mention the very brief appearance of Chicka Chicka Slim Lady, or Feminem. And I know what you're thinking. That guy's got a nice rack, but that guy is another girl boss. Slim Lady and these ladies are inspecting the area where Totally Not Gandalf landed. And you've already seen 95% of this in the trailer. Where was I? Oh, back in Numenor, Muriel gets called away, and then we get some forced argument between Halbrand and Galadriel. This whole show is about just filling time and creating content. Forced dialogue that ends up repeating itself, forced themes that end up repeating themselves, all so we can get to a destination we know we're going to end up at in a couple of episodes if anybody's awake or cares. 5 episodes in and we're still in the same place with Halbrand. He's still the reluctant leader, the Southern Aragorn, who's going to be set up to subvert our expectations and be Sauron. Even if I didn't know he was Sauron, I'd still think he was Sauron because I got that in the first episode. And just in case you didn't catch it the first time, the Harfoots are assholes.
Take their wheels and leave them.
Who are being tracked by wolves. You know how I can tell? Well, they saw a wolf track and then said, hey, it's wolves.
Wolves.
No shit, Sherlock.
Then they get attacked by bad CGI wolves, and quite frankly, I was rooting for the bad CGI wolves. For the book readers, that scene was supposed to be a callback to when the Fellowship was surrounded by wargs on their way to Moria. And we have arrived at the worst scene in this show. I know I said that last week with the Galadriel escape. Well, this time, it's worse, just like this show is getting worse. Galadriel trains Numenorians. To describe how ridiculous this is, it's like the Virgin Mary training Spartans. Just a reminder, Numenorians aren't just regular men, they're Ubermen. They live longer, they're smarter, they're stronger, they're faster, and they're fierce warriors. And I didn't think it was possible, but to make things worse, they have Elendil the Tall, who in the books is 7'11" and one of the fiercest Numenorian warriors, ask Galadriel to train his men. Oh, sorry, and women, or woman. Oh my god, she might be non-binary. And what's Galadriel, the Girlbarians warrior, the Wastelands, commander of the Northern armies and scourge of the orcs, big advice for the Numenorians?
There are many ways to kill an orc. But for you, I will keep it strong and simple. Stab, twist, gut.
Well, duh. That's right, it's to stab them with the sword. Then we get a Numenorian dance-off.
Morpheus is fighting Neo.
The acting was awful, the editing was terrible, and you can tell they were trying to hide Morfydd Clark as much as possible, having her walk behind giant beams or conveniently get blocked by somebody or cut away. I mean, what the hell is this? I mean, this is just embarrassing. And then she gives terrible advice.
Swordsmanship is about balance rather than strength. Fight with your feet, not your arms.
What are you, f***ing stupid?
Don't plant roots. Keep moving. Never trust brute force to best an orc.
Meanwhile, with Adar and those very white orcs, they're finished digging their big-ass trench. We also learned after Tweaker bent the knee that Adar doesn't like being called Sauron. Then he makes Tweaker kill Inceldril. What I'll probably end up saying in the rest of these reviews, the stupid doesn't end there. Like the repurposing hacks these fools are, the showrunners felt the need to give an origin to Mithril, an ore. It doesn't need an origin. It's probably based on orichalcum, which is the mysterious metal from Atlantis. According to the Rings of Power, the origin of Mithril is an elf fought a Balrog over a tree. And then we get garbage access media headlines like this, and as a Tolkien fan, it just infuriates me. Rings of Power Episode 5 rewrites the origins of Middle-earth's most precious metal. It's more like Rings of Power retards the origins of Middle-earth. And then we get this cockamamie subplot soap opera crap with the elves. Gil-galad sent Elrond to Khazad-dûm. Gil-galad lied to Elrond. Elrond is keeping the truth from Gil-galad. He was also keeping the truth from Durin. Then we find out that Grandma Brimbor was lying to Elrond too.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
Apparently, a cancerous tree in Lindon shows that the light of the Eldar is fading and the elves might have to leave Middle-earth or die. Their big savior? Mithril, which now apparently contains the light of the Silmarils, and they've just turned Mithril into a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is an object or device in a movie or a book that serves merely as a trigger for the plot. But the ring was a MacGuffin. Sure, an argument can be made. You'd be wrong, but one could be made. Big difference. The Lord of the Rings is good. The Rings of Power is shit. We had the dumbest scene, and now we have, again, the most, I guess I gotta use this word again, infuriating. There's some forced dialogue between Galadriel and Halbrand, and they completely telegraph that he's Sauron, but they also give Galadriel an opportunity to mention her husband, Celeborn, and she doesn't.
For every mystery, there is someone somewhere who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone was watching.
Have you seen this elf? Incidentally, we're just 2 episodes away from finding out that Celeborn is indeed dead. The reason he's dead in season 1 anyway is because they didn't want to rob Galadriel of her agency and they wanted to ship her with Halbrand. Hashtag Thorondriel. Meanwhile, in Harad Tucky, we get some incredibly boring and forgettable dialogue, kind of like this entire show. And then Theo finally shows Don Lemonless his sword hilt. And lucky for both of them, Don Lemonless has seen that before, on a wall about 3 feet away. And this is all setting up something completely different from the Battle of Helm's Deep in the 2 towers. This is going to be the Battle of Harad Tucky with 1 tower. The episode ends with the Númenóreans doing exactly what they set out to do last episode, and they just repeated it. They're sailing to Middle-earth.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
As we start out the episode with Adar talking to his children, the brothers and the sisters.
Yet before this night is through, some of us will fall. But as brothers and sisters in our home.
Anybody bring any extra bags?
No, nobody brought an extra bag.
I'll let your imagination do the rest. This question is for all the women out there, and by the way, today I identify as a biologist. Do you feel seen in this crowd of orcs? Adar and his very white orcs want to make evil great again, I guess that would be mega, and they're gonna do it by taking the Southlands in a scene that's totally not supposed to remind us of Helm's Deep. General Bronwyn and her male assistant Don Lemonless came up with the master plan of loosening every stone in the tower, so much so that all it would take is a single wooden beam to knock it down. How did they do this in essentially an evening? I don't know. That did admittedly kill some orcs, all to sacrifice their fortified position to go fight in a sparsely populated village filled with hovels and homes with wooden and thatched roofs.
Which is retarded.
But that's the kind of strategy you're going to get when you decide to make Summer Moonbeam, who runs the holistic medicine and CBD shop in Sunnyvale, your battle commander.
This is to be our keep, our fallback point. To your positions.
Remember when we spent 2 entire episodes with Galadriel trying to convince Halbrand and girl boss Muriel to sail to Middle-earth to fight for the Southlands? Then it took them about 10 minutes to sail there. Again, this is signature bad reboot disciple storytelling. They have no concept of time and distance. Just ask any Star Trek fan. But Elendil finally tells us what happened to Isildur's mother when Galadriel asks.
His mother. What happened to her?
She drowned. And the sea is always right.
That's some cold shit.
Listen, I know you only had $1 billion, and admittedly, you got a couple of CGI scenes right, but Look at this costuming. Look at this moob armor. Here is a great example of repurposing hackery. We have Don Lemonless here trying to destroy the MacGuffin, the sword hilt, which is a stand-in for the ring. But if that isn't enough for you, they have repurposed dialogue.
It is beyond our skill to destroy.
The ring cannot be destroyed, Gimli, son of Gloin, by any craft that we here possess.
Now, during the town meeting, we get another girl boss moment, and then this genius statement was made.
Our position gives us an advantage.
You know, it is like the actual Don Lemon and some cannabis dispensary owner from Marin came up with the battle plan for this town. Remember, they gave up their fortified watchtower, admittedly poorly put together by elves, to hide out in a tavern with a wooden roof. A tavern that is for the wounded and the children.
Tavern.
Taverns for wounded and children. I can fight.
I challenge any Tolkien expert or scholar to argue for that line sounding Tolkienian. Do you think something like that would come out of his mind or mouth? He would gouge your eyes out with his pipe just for attaching his name to this. Why do you think women stay behind with children? Because they're weaker? No, someone needs to take care of the children. But ladies, you have achieved equality. Now you're as disposable as men. Do you feel seen? But that's the biggest difference between writers today and writers of a now bygone era. The writers of today's whole experience is watching other people's films and TV shows, and the writers of the bygone era, for example, J.R.R. Tolkien, fought and survived in a world war, managed to raise a family, become a professor, and write a couple of books by hand. Some of the most accessible stories of all time. This Battle of Balls Deep is just ridiculous, and yes, I stole that from Az. It happens in a magically reconstructed town from 2 episodes ago where it was burning, again with thatched and wooden roofs. And their weapon of choice? Fire! They trapped the very white orcs in a very similar scenario to Obi-Wan not being able to get around that fence. All this was to set up the big twist that they were actually fighting their own. The men and women, the very diverse men and women who split off from the group because they weren't inspired by Girl Boss's speech. Allegory was a little subtle, so I'll just explain it to you like they do in the show for everything. The very white orcs were fighting with men and women who were fighting their own, like a civil war. I'm surprised they didn't say the South will rise again. Then in a scene that's totally not supposed to remind us of Aragorn fighting the Uruk-hai at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, we had Don Lemonless versus a big orc. Big difference here is he's saved by Bronwyn, but to be honest, if Fellowship was made today, Aragorn would have been saved by Arwen. That's now 3 confirmed orc kills for Girl Boss Bronwyn.
Slay!
After Don Lemonless and Girl Boss Bronwyn realize that they have been fighting their own, they decide to retreat into the tavern, but it's too late, and Bronwyn gets shot twice by arrows. Then everybody involved in this show must have forgot she got shot by 2 arrows, as we get a prolonged scene of them removing just 1. Adar finally breaks into the tavern, kills a couple of people, and Theo finally gives up the MacGuffin. And then we get some more repurposed dialogue.
Why sacrifice their lives for such a little thing? Strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing.
Now, I did predict this scene quite some time ago before anybody knew anything about this show, but it was in jest and I didn't get it completely right. Warrior Galadriel leading Númenóreans. Not going to be surprised at all to see diverse elves, inclusive dwarves, representative hobbits, an all-female legion of Númenórean warriors led by the warrior Galadriel in full body armor, cutting through orcs and goblins like they're butter. Yeah, I know, Nerdstradamus. Now, the next scene we have Adar or Adar and some obvious ADR. See what I did there?
Well, Drake, I have a task for you.
It's almost like they think the audience has the room temperature IQ of, I don't know, the Rings of Power writer's room. Adar or Adar handed Methrandil his package, hey now, with the sword hilt, and obviously we're gonna have to keep this in mind because, well, more than one person completely forgets to do something really important. We get Deus Ex Númenóreans led by, of course, warrior Galadriel, and this battle is just an absolute mess. We have side-saddling Galadriel not once, but twice, but in this first interaction, she's not anywhere near this orc that just explodes when she swings her sword 5 feet away from him. Of course, the moob armor is on display, and what the hell is going on with Elendil's helmet? And compare this to the Elendil from The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, that came out 20 years ago. Then Galadriel, the girl Barian, and Halbrand pursue Adar and his package, and Quite frankly, this fits in with Amazon. They would know a lot about stolen and lost packages. Halbrand trips Adar's horse, and hey, at least the director was nice enough to show that the horsey was okay. I mean, never mind all the people getting gutted and decapitated. Then we get some more cringe dialogue. Now, earlier in the episode, Guy Ladriel lectured Isildur on humility.
Despise not the labor which humbles the heart. Humility has saved entire kingdoms, the proud have all but led to ruin.
Bitch, are you for real?
Like she would know a thing about that. And then we get this nugget of Tolkienian dialogue.
One cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater.
Is she actually semi-lecturing Halbrand about revenge, the same woman who admitted last episode she's on a revenge quest? This leads to the interrogation scene between Guy Ladriel, who's going all Charlie Bronson, on Adar, and you will notice that Adar is almost as tall as Guy Ladriel sitting down. And this entire scene is an absolute desecration of Tolkien. They use the word Moriandor, which is made up for the show. Adar is made up for the show, and they extrapolate on the possible origins of the orcs. It's believed that Morgoth twisted men and elves into a mockery of life that would be the orc, something purely evil, and that's exactly what Tolkien intended. It didn't need any extrapolation from hacks. We also don't need Guy Ladriel threatening to torture the orcs to get information out of them. This is followed by something even worse, the Guy Ladriel Halbrand shipping scene.
Fighting at your side, I felt if I could just hold on to that feeling.
If they weren't interrupted, I'm pretty sure they were going to make out. Guy Ladriel and Sauron, and I'm not sorry, that's Sauron. And right on cue, there is a hashtag, Halandriel. It should be Saurondriel. This show was written by a marketing department full of people who skated through high school, made it to university, and they got multiple degrees in insert here studies.
You know, morons.
Speaking of morons, the Southerners just accept Halbrand as their king. I guess the Southern vetting process isn't as thorough as, say, Gondor's was. We know that Aragorn has a known lineage and was raised in Rivendell, and Halbrand just ran across Guy Ladriel in the middle of the ocean. Now remember, Guy Ladriel pursued Adar to get a package, which she did get, but she never bothered to open. Then she passed it off to Don Lemelness, who didn't bother to open it then. Then he passes it for some reason to Theo, who admits he misses it the same way that Bilbo was gonna miss the ring, and of course they repurposed the dialogue.
When it was in my hands, I felt powerful.
Then rid yourself of it. Trust me, as you once did. Let it go.
Considering this is dark magic, I have no idea why Don Lemonless gave it back to Theo, but I also have no idea why nobody bothered to check the package. Hey now. Turns out it was just an axe, and Mithrandir went back to the town while everybody was dicking around, and he decided to put the sword hilt key into the lock. But before we get to that, and if I miss anything, feel free to put it in the comments section below. Let's go to Adar's big plan. First, dig big trenches, dig small tunnels, not get noticed by the keen-eyed elves.
Keen to the eyes of the elves.
A big-ass trench!
Count on High Regional Manager Gilgalad to cancel war and call all the elves back from that watchtower. Then capture those elves, hope they escape so you can kill most of them except for one, so you can send him back with all his weapons to send a message. All while Adar and his very white orcs look for a sword hilt. How do they know about this sword hilt? I don't know. Then ultimately get defeated by the Southerners and the Deus Ex Numenorians, led by Warrior Galadriel, and then count on Guy Ladriel and Don Lemonless to not open that package that you obviously switched into the last possible moment for dramatic effect. So Mithrandir can turn the lock, which opens up a spillway from a dam that just so happens to fill up all of the trenches and holes that you dug to start a volcano. Also, you can block out the sun for your 5 orcs that are left. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your very dumb origin of Mount Doom. And no, that amount of water couldn't have started the volcano because the chamber wasn't pressurized. Still, the volcano explodes. Adar escapes. By the way, he knows Halbrand is Sauron too. And the town and Guy Ladriel get hit by a pyroclastic flow that no elf or human would survive. They're not Superman.
Your kind was a mistake.
Unfortunately, Galadriel survives, looking like she's covered in Cheetos. Nerd Cookies is right. The Cheeto is but a passing thing. For the vast majority of you who didn't watch this episode, nothing happens. Sure, there's a lot of wandering around with contradictory dialogue and exposition, looking for dead people we know are alive, deciding whether to dig for Mithril or not, again, ending with the single most low-effort twist in history. And it's just boring, and I have to remind you that this is the penultimate episode of the most expensive television show in history. Galadriel lives, but in typical Galadriel fashion, she completely ignores a burning horse, people screaming for their lives, and a baby screaming until she runs into Theo, a character she has no connection with. Admittedly, it's only slightly more than all the people she just ignored, who were dying screaming. Then it turns into Mordor 911, where Isildur, the man who cuts the ring from Sauron's hand, the great warrior, future king, needs Queen Regent Muriel's help to lift a roof off of his friend. The same Muriel who was described by Tolkien as fairer than silver or ivory or pearls. Then Isildur and Queen Regent Muriel go and save some children. She is blinded by some ashes and the house collapses on Isildur. Gee, I wonder if the guy who cuts the ring from the hand of Sauron is dead. Unfortunately, the Harfoots are back and they make it to their destination and they find that a few trees are burnt. So of course they give up hope because they're assholes and idiots like the writers of this show. I guess that volcano in the Southlands that we're not supposed to say is Mordor at this point has a pretty good range. Once again, we're deciding whether or not we should dig for Mithril. King Durin says no after Elrond basically pleads for his life and sells out the elves.
For I am no common elf, but Elrond half-elven, and I see in elves that which they cannot see in themselves.
So all the elves are going to die, and Durin III is completely okay with this. He just says it's the will of wiser minds who know more than they do. Elrond is sad, Durin IV is sad, Disa is mad. They say their goodbyes, then Durin throws the Mithril next to the cancer leaf, and it cures it. So after being told not to dig for Mithril again, they decide to dig for Mithril again. Compelling stuff. By the way, in the lore, this should not be Elrond. This should be Celebrimbor. 22 minutes into the penultimate episode of the first season of the most expensive television show of all time, and they finally tell us something of note. Everyone in the Southlands is wandering to a Númenórean camp. Oh, and Elendil thinks Isildur is dead, the guy who's going to cut the ring from the hand of Sauron. This is almost as dumb as centering your whole entire first season of the most expensive television show of all time around the mystery of who is Sauron. It's Halbrand, and it never should have been Halbrand. Then there's some cringe contradictory dialogue.
Everyone.
What cannot be known hollows the mind. Fill it not with guesswork.
That is precisely what Galadriel has been doing for centuries with Sauron, who's Halbrand. Then Theo asks Galadriel this.
When I was your age, there was no such thing as orcs.
How many have you killed?
Many.
Good.
I would not use such words. It darkens the heart to call dark deeds good.
That's rich.
Except didn't Galadriel in the previous episode just threaten to torture and kill all of Adar's orc children right before she kills him? So Elendil figures out that Muriel is blind.
How much further until we're clear of this smoke? How long have we been clear of it?
Nearly a mile.
I see.
This reminds me of a scene from She-Hulk this week.
I think you're in a unique position to do some real good. See, the way I see it.
Listen, I have to mix some entertainment into this review. Nothing happens this episode. Back to the Harfoots, totally not Gandalf tries to heal a tree in what will totally not look like the Shire when he's done. While totally not Gandalf is doing that, a branch breaks off and female Frodo decides to push her little sister towards the tree. So of course the little ass banish him again, and it leads to probably the most satisfying scene in the entire series. I love that they spent 2 minutes of screen time having female Frodo very slowly hand not Gandalf an apple. And this discourages little female Frodo, and she decides she won't be subverting Harfoot traditions after all.
She wants to subvert Harfoot tradition.
Nope. This brings us to the scene, and I find it very hard to believe that Galadriel, the warrior of the wasteland, commander of the northern armies, and scourge of the orcs, on her mission of vengeance, failed to mention her husband for 7 episodes. Have you seen this, Elf? Feels like this one was tacked on and reshot.
Have you ever lost someone close?
My brother, Finrod, and my husband.
As we've been saying for months, Celeborn is dead for now. Again, this is just stupid mystery box for the very same reasons I mentioned earlier. The same reason Isildur possibly being dead is stupid. The same reason centering your entire first season of the most expensive show of all time around who is Sauron is stupid as the showrunners. And yes, it's also stupid that they haven't been fired. Remember when I mentioned it gets worse?
When he went to it, I chided him. His armor didn't fit properly. Called him a silver clam. I never saw him again after that.
Galadriel, who did not take part in the major wars of the first age or the second, clowns Celeborn, who did, about his armor not fitting right. Amazon and the intersectionalists running this show aren't just happy demoralizing and diminishing Tolkien's characters who are alive in the show, they're diminishing dead ones. This is followed by some more repurposed dialogue.
There are powers beyond darkness at work in this world.
There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil.
And a repurposed scene. Theo and Galadriel hiding from the orcs is totally not supposed to remind us of the hobbits hiding from the Nazgul. And we're only halfway through the episode. I guess the good news is less happens in the second half. So let's recap Doogie Elrond and Durin. They decided to dig for Mithril, got shut down by King Durin III. Then they decided to ask King Durin III if they could dig for Mithril again. He said no, so they decided to dig for Mithril again and got shut down by King Durin III. Doogie Elrond gets banished and Durin gets ripped of his succession. I'm guessing at some point later in the episode, somebody's gonna talk Durin into digging for Mithril again. Here's my favorite scene from the show, and it's not anything the writers did intentionally. The Harfoots wake up in essentially the Shire. Turns out totally not Gandalf healed the place. While they were out foraging, they ran across Chicka Chicka Slim Lady, or Feminem, and her girlfriends. Who are these people? No idea. Do they speak a line of dialogue? No. I'm going to tell you something the show hasn't for 7 episodes. It's an all-female Sauron cult. Female Frodo tries to distract the all-female Sauron cult so they won't go after not Gandalf, and when Hobo Baggins puts a torch in their face, Chicka Chicka Slim Lady burns their village. Little shits had it coming. The only reason I'm even mentioning this scene is because it's repurposed from the Two Towers. Elendil lets Isildur's horse go, which I'm guessing will probably be just like in the Two Towers when Aragorn lets Brago go, Theodred's horse, and he comes back and rescues him later. 53 minutes into the penultimate episode of season 1, we finally find out that Bronwyn isn't dead. I know, I was disappointed too. We also find out that Halbrand is mortally wounded. Oh, I do have to point out, we get a good shot of Galadriel in the sunlight, and she doesn't have a scratch on her body. Not a single golden hair is singed. Where was I? Oh, Halbrand is mortally wounded. He's on death's door. This is it for him. He doesn't stand a chance. So he stands up, walks casually to a horse, mounts the horse on his own, sits up straight, and he's gonna ride a fortnight to get some elvish medicine. The Harfoots, including female Frodo, female Sam, and Hobo Baggins, are off to save totally not Gandalf from the female Sauron simps. I'm not sure how that's going to happen because Feminem is a day ahead of them. Despite their still being missing, dead, and wounded, the Númenóreans are fucking off. And while our 2 girl bosses, one of them being blind, are stoically saying goodbye to each other, Elendil the Tall, the mighty warrior, cries, "Fuck this show." And this may come as a surprise to you, but the final Durin scene is he's talked back into digging for Mithril again by Disa, who starts making all kinds of crazy statements.
One day this will be your kingdom. Not some other dwarf lord's. Yours. And mine. And together we will rule this mountain and all others before our time is done.
What do you mean, our kingdom? What do you mean, rule together? Before anybody thinks that they're setting her up to be some sort of ruse, No. No way in hell they do this with
the first female dwarf.
Oh yeah, and we did get to see the Balrog. Don't get excited, he won't be back till next season in 2025.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Then we get the final scene with Adar and his very white orcs in their new homeland where evil can thrive. I'm sure we can all speculate where it is, but just in case you missed it, this is it, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. In the penultimate episode, at the very end of the first season of the most expensive show ever made, their big reveal of Mordor is a font change.
Wait till you see the... No, 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 no.
That has to go down as the dumbest, low-effort, unsurprising reveal in television history.
One, always back to Tolkien, and two, when Tolkien was silent, we tried to invent it as Tolkienian a way as possible. Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
So I play the character of Princess Disa. She is the first female dwarf that we will ever see on screen.
Woo, woo, woo!
I hunted, Rob. I hunted to try to find a negative one.
I'm excited about the Rings of Power, but how gay could it be from the digital fix?
It was like I was trying, but every time I was like, okay, take a breath, something new would happen, and it was...
What's the deal with everyone saying that dwarven women are meant to have beards? Is that from the books?
It's like a bizarre fan fascination. Tolkien never says dwarven women have beards.
And so Tolkien doesn't say anything about Harfoots not having done anything amazing in the Second Age. He says that hobbits before the Third Age didn't do anything impressive. So we felt we had license there to go ahead and tell a good Harfoot story.
Take their wheels and leave them.
It's just going to mean so much to like me personally because it's getting that representation in Middle-earth.
There will no longer be a time where you can say there are no elves of color.
Looks can be deceiving.
You have not seen what I have seen.
What I would consider to be my most major concerns are significantly less concerning now, after having spoken with the showrunners.
Why do some elves have short hair? Patrick.
Elves, like any race of many, many beings, don't all look the same all the time, especially not over thousands of years, and in the books it sure felt like that's what Tolkien was saying too, so that's what we did.
She wants to subvert Harfoot tradition.
The first female dwarf that we will see.
A lot of talking about my girl Galadriel.
Yeah, I love Galadriel.
There's a tempest in me. Conflicted. Stab, twist, gut. Come at me. And whatever it was you did, be free of it.
Like, I can fix him.
Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
A lot of talking about my girl Galadriel.
Yeah, I love Galadriel.
Episode starts out with totally not Gandalf or Methdolf getting hoodwinked into thinking his apple was stolen by female Frodo when she actually transforms into Chicka Chicka Slim Lady or Feminem. And the rest of the ladies, showing an awful lot of leg there, bow to what they think is Lord Sauron. And look at how Feminem is bowing. It looks like she's mounting something. Doesn't take very long to get to our very first member berry. We have Galadriel, who has been riding for 6 days to Eregion with a mortally wounded Halbrand. Well, I'm just going to call him Sauron since we all know at this point. And this scene is supposed to remind us of the Lord of the Rings. Remember when Arwen saved Frodo? And they're not even mining the books for member berries, they're mining the Peter Jackson trilogy, the very same Peter Jackson trilogy that the Access Media is arguing that this show is improving on. Doogie Elrond and Grandma Brimbor are at their wits' end because they're dimwits. High Regional Manager Gilgalad is going to arrive within a day, and Grandma Brimbor, who's supposed to be Celebrimbor, the Master Smith and Lord of Eregion, doesn't know what to do with that small of an amount of mithril.
If only there was some way of doing more with less.
Something small and round that rhymes with sing or ding? I'll think of it later.
We must inform the High King of our failure.
That line is applicable to every single person involved in this show, right down to the caterer. Meanwhile, Sauron is getting elvish medicine, even though Dom Lemonless said earlier on in the season that there was no elvish medicine. Maybe they just gave him some Robitussin.
Daddy, I got asthma. Robitussin.
Then we get more of that Tolkienian dialogue between Doogie Elrond and Guy Ladriel.
How is it you are here?
How is it you are here? You have not seen what I have seen. I did not cross that bitter ocean, only to drown now.
Well, actually, you didn't swim across any ocean, Guy Ladriel. You technically randomly came across not one, but 2 rafts and then a ship. And I think I'm speaking for most of the audience by saying, we wish you would have drowned.
The sea is always right.
Does that sound a little harsh? Yeah, maybe. Meanwhile, back in Eregion, Sauron confers with Grandma Brimbor, and apparently the Lord and Master Smith doesn't know how to combine ores. And is it just me? Is it not only the dialogue atrocious, but so is the acting in the scene?
These gemstones, I've never seen anything like them. What do you plan to use them for? This is a peculiar ore. What is it? Not enough. Enough for what? Forgive me, but at the risk of sounding a fool, couldn't the right alloy also amplify those qualities?
And for the few Tolkien fans out there who were still looking forward to something in this show, maybe seeing the Elven Smiths of Eregion, well, they were just window dressing with no dialogue. We get one scene with Pharazôn, who's supposed to be a big player in the Second Age, and he almost gets close to giving us a hint of what the motivations are of the King's men, who are on the other side of the faithful. Of course, they don't come out and say it because they expect you to wait for 3 years. They want immortality. Then there's a scene that's eerily similar to last week's House of the Dragon, a dying king confusing somebody for his daughter and spilling an uber secret prophecy. Except it worked in House of the Dragon, and in this show, it just makes Girl Isildur the impetus for the faithful leaving Numenor. By the way, it's in this scene a pop-up ad came up while I was watching this show, and I agree with Shad M. Brooks from Shadiversity's theory. This is a way to pad the views. Not Elendil or Isildur. By the way, we're supposed to think Isildur is still dead. We don't see him at all in this episode. The guy who cuts the ring from the hand of Sauron. This show is stupid.
Mystery box.
The other thing I can't stand this show for is making Gil-galad, Celebrimbor, and Elrond complete idiots. High Regional Manager Gil-galad finally shows up to just tell them that they don't have enough time. The leaf cancer is killing the tree and they need to get the hell out of Middle-earth. Many have asked, is this in the lore? The tree cancer, the darkness spreading over Middle-earth in the Second Age? No. And it doesn't make any sense within the context of the lore. They completely made it up like 99% of the show. This is where Grandma Brimbor comes up with the idea of the ring, except it was Sauron's idea.
We are on the cusp of crafting a new kind of power. Not of the flesh, but over flesh. This is...
Why did Grandma Brimbor repeat what Adar said? Don't know. But that kicks in Detective Guy Ladriel. You know, the same battle commander that didn't know the mark of Sauron was a range of mountains in a place maybe called Mordor until she actually looked at a map. The same Guy Ladriel who convinced Sauron to leave Numenor and convinced Numenor to bring a quote-unquote army to the Southlands to save about 20 people. That will get answered later. Sauron thanks Guy Ladriel for saving his life, which is obviously a setup. Oh, not for Sauron, for something much worse. Incel Sauron. Meanwhile, with Methdolf, who's totally not Gandalf, we find out where those stars are in Rhûn at the Hermit's Hat, which is totally not supposed to look like Gandalf's hat, for fuck's sake. I don't know if you can get more on the nose. This is so bad. And do they just carry this thing around? The stinky Harfoots try to save Methdolf from Chicka Chicka Slim Lady, which sets up another member berry, a fight that's supposed to remind us of Gandalf versus Saruman. Totally not Gandalf. Conveniently, he starts to remember who he is. He gets Feminem's staff and fights off the Sauron Sims who don't look at all like female Nazgul or Nazgirls. And for extra bonus memberberry points, he fights them off with the Moth. Remember the Moth from Fellowship? I know, I can feel you cringe from here. It's almost over, folks. We can do this. In the Harfoot's Infinite Wisdom, they sent out female Frodo, female Sam, Hobo Baggins' wife, and Lenny Henry to stop Chicka Chicka Slim Lady and the other ladies. So, of course, the man dies. Totally not Gandalf or Methdolf had the power to heal some trees, heal himself, but he couldn't heal a brother. Briefly, back to Numenor. Remember, it took them 2 episodes to decide to sail to Middle-earth, which just took a day, and then they fought there for a day. Then it took about 6 hours to come back. Also, we could get another shipping scene between Blind, but I'm not really sure why, because her eyes look pretty good, Muriel and Elendil. Shipping on a ship. I hate this show and I want it to be over now. Oh yeah, the king dies and I doubt anyone will remember when season 2 rolls around in 2.5 to 3 years. Master Smith and Lord of Eregion, Celebrimbor and Doogie Elrond are yelling at each other because the Mithril isn't behaving. Good thing Galadriel is there to calm them down and say maybe they're just pushing it too far. And because this show is a lesson in contrived events.
Supposing we've been using too much force.
Meaning that the metals shouldn't be forced to join, but more drawn or coaxed together. Now, if that's true, we've been doing it all inside out.
So, now we just need to design and build a machine that can harness the energy of 10,000 supernovas through micro wormholes and direct that energy to recharge Klingon time crystals, of which we know nothing about.
I have it right here. I built it while you were talking.
What?
What? I paid attention in science school.
Essentially, they just said, let's reverse the polarity. Ah, so Tolkienian. Based on one single statement by Celebrimbor earlier, power of the flesh, not over the flesh, Galadriel, who previously trusted Halbrand to rule over entire kingdoms, now she doesn't trust him at all, so she sends out a young Vulcan to investigate him, and he comes right back conveniently with an entire scroll that tells her everything she needs to know. And probably should have asked a lot sooner. Sauron tells Galadriel that the power is too much for one object, so they need to make 2 small things that rhyme with sing or ding. They don't want to tell us yet because it's all part of the mystery.
Who's that? We don't know. Mystery box.
Turns out Sauron wasn't an heir to the King of the Southlands because there hasn't been a king in the Southlands for 1,000 years. Maybe that was a question you should have asked people in the Southlands, or maybe the elves who were looking over the people in the Southlands. Like, hey, when was the last time you had a king? How does the Scourge of the Orcs, the Warrior of the Wasteland, and Commander of the Northern Armies not know this? I can hear the shills now. Well, Tolkien didn't specifically say anything about the vetting process for a Southern king or the elves. And here's our big moment. Sauron, sorry, Halbrand, is Sauron.
I have been awake since before the breaking of the first silence. In that time, I have had many names.
Somebody kill me, please!
And then we get a series of 3 very drawn out long scenes that I'm just gonna try to go by as quick as possible because quite frankly, I want this to be over. We get the last temptation of Galadriel. Sauron, disguised as Finrod, Galadriel's brother, asks her to touch his darkness. But then we find out the worst crime of all. What type of crime? A crime against imagination, an atrocity of creativity, a crime against Tolkien. The showrunners deliberately left out Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, and Celebrian, Galadriel's daughter, so they could ship her with Sauron on a ship. Okay, technically it's a raft, but you know what I mean. And if the great Professor Tolkien isn't spinning in his grave enough, they end up using repurposed dialogue for this scene.
I would make you a queen, fair as the sea and the sun, stronger than the foundations of the earth.
Treacherous as the sea! Stronger than the foundations of the earth!
Yes, they saved the worst for last. That's Mystery Box for you, but we're not done yet. Galadriel now knows that Halbrand is Sauron, and she knows that he's trying to make rings to gain power, and she doesn't tell Elrond and Celebrimbor. She almost stabs Doogie Elrond, and look at how tiny she is. She runs back to Celebrimbor with Elrond in tow, and they both ask her where Halbrand is, and she says, "Trust me, bro." Again, she knows the Dark Lord Sauron is back. He wants to make some sort of power to take over Middle-earth, and she's not telling anybody. While Elrond looks slightly concerned, Celebrimbor doesn't look concerned at all. For some reason, Celebrimbor asks Galadriel if they should continue making the rings. She says no, and then tells them to continue, with one exception.
So, do we proceed?
No. We must make 3.
And because they want to turn Tolkien's grave into a tornado, it is Galadriel who recommends the 3 elven rings.
1 will always corrupt. 2 will divide.
But with 3, there is balance.
What? There's this long drawn-out goodbye scene with the Harfoots as female Frodo takes off with Methdolf, or Totally Not Gandalf. Except he's Gandalf. More repurposed dialogue, please.
When in doubt, always follow your nose.
If in doubt, Enoch, always follow your nose.
Oh my God, thank God that is over, and I don't have to look at Harfoots for at least 2.5 years. Maybe somebody will come to their senses at Amazon and cancel this shit. And there's another long drawn-out scene with the construction of the rings, and I'm sure they did this practical, and it still looks like costume jewelry, far inferior to Peter Jackson's version. You know, the same guy Amazon ghosted. Again, thank God for small favors, am I right, Peter? Oh yeah, Elrond finds the scroll in the creek, and he figures out that Halbrand isn't king. Not sure if he finds out if he's Sauron. And then we get another scene that's essentially repurposed from the end of Fellowship to be the big Sauron reveal. And I'm not sure which green screen looks worse. The one in the beginning of the episode with Galadriel riding on a horse, or this one. Either way, you have to understand, Amazon only had $60 million an episode.
Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
Prior to season 1 premiering, Jeff Bezos' own son told him not to fuck it up. But he did in every possible way, because this happens every single time you prioritize the message over storytelling. Because the people involved in this show are not creatives or creators, they're not writers, they're repurposers. And The Rings of Power Season 1 is still everything wrong with modern Hollywood. And it's absolutely no surprise that this show lost 63%, that's 2/3 of its audience here in the United States. So as we hurl towards Season 2, I'm sure 5s and 10s of you are chomping at the bit to find out what happened to female Sam and female Frodo. What happened to Totally Not Gandalf? What's the fate of Don Lemonless? And will he ever get his Guess Who's Coming to Second Breakfast? Oh, I guess not. What's gonna happen with Slim Lady and the Nazgirls? Will Celebrimbor, the Master Smith who just found out about Alloy, figure out that this is just Halbrand in a wig who's the master of disguise, Sauron? Will warrior Galadriel, the slayer of orcs, who searched for Sauron for 1,000 years without a map and then ran into him in the middle of the ocean and almost screwed him and then let him go when she found out who he was, finally realize she's retarded? And where in the hell is Celeborn? And after introducing the first elf of color who wasn't the first elf of color, and the first dwarf of color who wasn't the first dwarf of color, will we get more firsts, like the first Asian elf of color, or the first black female steward of color? Maybe we'll get the first non-binary character of color who designed and built the town of Bree by themselves, or the first lesbian elf of color to bake a loaf of lambus bread and then later create the Middle-earth equivalent to you all.
One small bite is enough to fill the stomach of a grown...
They, them.
I jest, but...
So many of us in the LGBT community see ourselves in Tolkien's writings. Any chance we'll see ourselves on the show?
Maybe you have already.
Shucks.
Gee, I wonder who mentioned that was going to happen. Will Amazon dial back the cringe PR?
Nope.
And with genius showrunners like J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who said Sauron will be like Walter White in Season 2 and based a troll on Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, what could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out everything again, and the fandom will be there. Let the memes flow. Hail the victorious fellowship.
Nerdrotic.com.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it!